Do you remember that guy who steals Woody in Toy Story 2? That's right, Al himself. Well, today's theory is exactly about the origin of Al's toy barn and how this whole story might be connected to the Pixar universe. So come closer, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. The video is really cool and full of interesting details. This theory is based on the testimony of Mike Mozart, a guy who once worked close to Pixar and shared some curious information. He said that Al's father owned a huge farm and was one of the richest men in town. However, when Al was still a child, his mother passed away, leaving a great void. To try to ease this pain, his father began giving him countless toys, almost as a way to compensate for the absence of his mother. There were so many toys that over time, this turned into a real fixation. This detail explains perfectly why, as an adult, Al opened a store completely dedicated to toys, the famous Toy Barn, in addition to becoming an obsessive collector. As a kid, Al certainly had access to several rare toys, including those from Woody's collection. But there was one he never managed to have, and that left his collection incomplete. That toy was none other than Woody himself. His passion for the character started early, since Al loved Woody's Roundup show, the same one that later appears in his apartment in Toy Story 2. The interesting detail is that the show appears in black and white, which means it aired when Al was still a child. Even so, he kept the tapes with great care. Over time, Al inherited and began to run the family farm. However, little by little, he sold off the land until only the barn was left. It was in that space that the famous toy store was born. Looking closely, we notice that the barn is much older than the modern buildings around it. There's rust on the roof and clear signs of wear. Inside, the toys were new, but the structure was clearly old. Little by little, the city grew and swallowed up the barn, leaving it surrounded by modern buildings and businesses. This contrast already showed that Al's business wasn't keeping up with the city's pace. In Toy Story 2, we see clear signs that he was going bankrupt, and one of the biggest pieces of evidence comes from Barbie's line in that scene.
And this is the Buzz Lightyear aisle. Back in 1995, short-sighted retailers did not order enough dolls to meet demand.
She makes it clear that Buzz was one of the best-selling toys of the time, something we already knew since Toy Story 1. However, Al would buy large quantities, let everything pile up, and couldn't get the stock moving. Demand kept dropping as the years went by, and the store shelves became more and more crowded, with no empty space left. This buildup shows that the toys weren't being sold. On top of that, Al's desperation to raise money becomes evident when he tries to sell off his entire Japanese collection.
Yes! You got a deal! I'll be on the next flight to Japan!
By the end of the movie, he holds a massive clearance sale, slashing prices to the minimum to try to recover something.
Welcome to Al's Toy Barn. We've got the lowest prices in town. Everything for
But even then, he ends up going bankrupt and is forced to get rid of the toy barn. And that's where the big question arises. Who would Al sell the barn to? Within Pixar's theory, the most likely answer is that he sold it to By and Large, the famous B&L company that appears in WALL-E. This makes a lot of sense, because in the movie up we also see B&L buying land, including the area around Carl and Ellie's house. This connection reinforces even more the idea that Toy Story and Up take place in the same city, tied together by this detail. According to Mike Mozart, the inspiration for Al's story also came from the book The Little House. The book tells the story of a house that once lived peacefully in the countryside, but over time the city grew around it. In the end, the house is removed and taken back to the countryside, but in a new place. This fits perfectly with Al's narrative. His father kept selling off the farmland until only the barn remained, and then the city grew around that building. Another incredible connection between Up and Toy Story appears in a specific scene. While Carl's house is being lifted by balloons, we see through a bedroom window a little girl playing with the famous Pixar ball. In the corner of the screen, Lotso also appears, and the most impressive part isn't even that. It's the fact that this same little girl shows up later in Toy Story 3 at Sunnyside Daycare. This detail ties the stories even closer together and shows that everything really happens within the same universe. With all these clues, it becomes increasingly clear that B&L was the one who bought Al's toy barn and expanded its business in the region. And if you enjoy this kind of theory, click on one of these videos popping up here on the side. There's a lot of fascinating stuff about the Pixar universe that you're definitely going to love. Thanks so much for watching until the end, and see you in the next video on Cine Lovers.